1,200 people went to work on a normal Tuesday morning. By lunchtime, they had no jobs. No warning, no explanation, no phone call the night before. Just gone. Their pension gone. Their colleagues gone. 233 years of history. Sold for £1 before dinner. One man did that. Not a war, not a crash, not an act of God. One man. He was 28 years old. He was a plasterer's son from a town nobody romanticizes. He was not a genius. He was not even, by his own admission, particularly good at mathematics. But every single morning for 3 years, he sat alone in a glass tower in Singapore, typed a number into a screen and prayed. Prayed that nobody in London would ever look. They never looked. Until the morning the number was so large, so catastrophically, irreversibly large, that looking was the only thing left to do. And by then it was already over. The bank that survived Napoleon, the bank that financed the purchase of half of America, the bank that held a private account for the Queen of England herself, sold to a Dutch company for £1 British, the price of a newspaper. He left 2 words on his desk and walked out into the Singapore morning and never came back. 2 words. I'm sorry. This is not a story about a criminal. This is a story about a system so drunk on profit that it forgot to ask one simple question. And what happened when nobody asked it? Welcome to Fortuna Files. Every fortune leaves a paper trail. Some trails end in places that should never have existed. Part 1. WATFORD, 1967. Nicholas William Leeson was born on February 25, 1967, in Watford, Hertfordshire, a town just north of London that nobody particularly romanticizes. His father was a self-employed plasterer. His mother was a nurse. They were working class in the most honest, unadorned sense of the phrase, decent people who worked with their hands, paid their bills, and had no connections to the world of high finance whatsoever. Nick was bright, not in the way that gets you into Oxford or Cambridge. He finished school in 1985 with 6 O-levels and 2 A-levels, but bright in the way that matters in rooms where confidence and quick thinking count for more than credentials. He had an instinct for people. He had charm. And he had a hunger, a specific, grinding, slightly desperate hunger that comes from watching the world you want to be part of from the outside. At 18, he got a job as a clerk at the Lombard Street branch of Coutts, one of the most exclusive private banks in Britain, founded in 1692, the Bank of the Royal Family. Nick Leeson was not there to manage royal accounts. He was there to settle paper checks, but he was in the building. He was watching, and he was learning. He moved to Morgan Stanley's Futures and Options back office in 1987. Then, in 1989, he joined Barings Bank, the institution that would define and ultimately destroy his life. His starting salary was £12,000 a year. Part 2. Barings Bank, the institution. Before we go any further, you need to understand exactly what Barings Bank was. Because to understand the scale of what was about to happen, you need to understand the scale of what was about to be destroyed. Barings Bank was founded in 1762, the same year that Mozart was 6 years old and composing his first pieces, the same year that the British Empire was at the peak of its 7 Years' War dominance. It was founded by Francis Baring, the son of a German wool merchant who had emigrated to England. Over the next 2.5 centuries, Barings did not just survive history, it financed it. It financed the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, the transaction through which the United States bought 828,000 square miles of territory from Napoleon's France for $15 million, the deal that doubled the size of America. Barings arranged it. It financed the Napoleonic Wars. It financed the construction of the Erie Canal. It survived the First World War, the Second World War, the Great Depression, the collapse of the Bretton Woods system, the oil crisis of 1973, and the Black Monday crash of 1987. By 1995, it had survived everything the world had thrown at it for 233 years. Its clients included some of the most powerful corporations and governments on Earth, and among its personal clients, holding a private account, was Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. This was not just a bank. This was a British institution woven into the fabric of the country's history and identity, as deeply as the Houses of Parliament or Buckingham Palace itself. And it was about to be destroyed by a man from Watford, who could not even get a broker's license in the United Kingdom. Part 3, Singapore 1992, The Golden Boy. In 1990, Nick Leeson was sent to Jakarta, Indonesia, to help sort out a back-office problem, £100 million worth of share certificates that had gone missing in an administrative disaster. He sorted it out in 10 months. London noticed. When Barings decided to open a futures trading operation in Singapore in 1992, they sent Leeson to run it. He was 25 years old. His title was General Manager of Barings Futures Singapore. He would be trading on the Singapore International Monetary Exchange, SIMEX. Here is where the catastrophic structural flaw enters the story. Nick Leeson was given control of both the front office, the trading, and the back office, the settlement and record-keeping. He was simultaneously the person placing the bets and the person recording the results of those bets. In any properly functioning financial institution, these two roles are deliberately separated, specifically to prevent any individual from being able to hide what they are doing. At Barings Singapore, they were given to the same man. Later, Nick Leeson himself would say, "It was a bizarre structure, and one which allowed me to run my own show without anyone interfering." Nobody in London questioned this arrangement, because in 1993, Nick Leeson's trading generated almost 10% of Barings' total global profits. When a man is making you that much money, you do not ask uncomfortable questions about how his office is structured. He was celebrated, he was promoted, he was paid spectacularly. He and his wife Lisa had a beautiful apartment in Singapore, a six-figure salary, exotic weekend trips across Asia. From the outside, it looked like pure success. From the inside, it had already started to collapse. Part 4, Account 88,888, The Secret. It began with someone else's mistake. In July 1992, a junior trader on Leeson's desk, a young woman named Kim Wong, made an error. She sold contracts she should have bought, resulting in a loss of approximately £20,000. It was a small mistake, the kind of thing that happens in trading offices every week. Nick Leeson did not report it. He had a reputation to protect. He was the golden boy, the star, the man from Watford who was making London look brilliant, a £20. Zero error on his watch, no matter whose fault, was not something he was willing to absorb. Not yet, not when everything was going so well. He hid the loss in an obscure internal error account that already existed in Barings Singapore system. The account number was 88,888. In Chinese culture, 8 is the luckiest number. A sequence of 5 8s is considered extraordinarily auspicious. The irony is almost too painful to write. The losses in account 88,888 sat quietly. Leeson made profitable trades elsewhere and reported those to London while the hidden losses compounded in the background. He told himself it was temporary. He would trade his way out of it. He always had before. But the losses did not stay small. They grew. By the end of 1992, account 88,888 was down £2 million. A year later, £23 million. By the end of 1994, £208 million. £208 million. Hidden, invisible to everyone in London, concealed inside a number that was supposed to mean good luck. And still nobody came. Nobody looked. Nobody asked the question that would have ended it years earlier. Where is the money coming from? Because it was not coming from brilliant trading. It was coming from Barings itself. Leeson had been requesting cash from London to cover his trading margin requirements, and because his reported profits were so spectacular, London kept sending it. He was effectively using the bank's own money to fund the secret account that was hiding his losses from the bank. A perfect, devastating circle. He later described the experience in words that should be read by every manager of every institution in the world. I wanted to shout from the rooftops. This is what the situation is. There are massive losses. I want to stop. But for some reason, you're unable to do it. I had this catastrophic secret which was burning up inside me, yet I simply couldn't open my mouth and say, I've lost millions and millions of pounds. He could not stop, not because he was evil, but because stopping meant confession, and confession meant the end of everything he had built, everything he had become. The boy from Watford who had made it, the genius trader who had outperformed every expectation, the man who belonged. He could not stop being that man. So he kept going. Part 5. The Earthquake That Ended Everything. January 16th, 1995. Nick Leeson placed a bet, a specific high-risk trading position called a short straddle, essentially a wager that the Japanese stock market, the Nikkei, would remain stable overnight. Not go up, not go down, just stay still. The morning of January 17th at 5:46 a.m. local time, the Great Hanshin earthquake struck Kobe, Japan. Magnitude 6.9. Over 6,000 people killed. An entire city shattered in 90 seconds. The Nikkei plunged. Leeson's position was destroyed instantly. What he did next is the decision that sealed everything. Instead of accepting the loss, cutting his position, and coming clean, he doubled down. He bought more futures contracts, betting that the Japanese market would recover quickly. It did not recover. He bought more. Still no recovery. He bought more. Over the following weeks, in a desperate escalating attempt to trade his way out of a hole that was already unfillable, Nick Leeson accumulated more than 20,000 futures contracts. At the peak of his position, he controlled half of all open interest in Nikkei futures and 85% of all Japanese government bond futures trading on the exchange. Other traders saw what was happening. They did not know who was behind the positions, but they saw the sheer scale of them, and they began trading against him deliberately, pushing the market in the direction that would hurt him most. He was being hunted, and he was too deep in to escape. By February 1995, account 88,888 had losses of £827 million. The entire capital and reserves of Barings Bank totaled approximately £440 million. The losses were not just larger than the bank could cover. They were almost exactly twice as large. There was no rescue possible. There was no transaction that could fix this. There was no conversation that could make the number smaller. The number was real, and it was fatal, and Nick Leeson knew it before anyone else did. Part 6. The Note and the Flight. On February 23, 1995, the day before his 28th birthday, Nick Leeson left his office for the last time. He wrote "I'm sorry" on a piece of paper and left it on his desk. He and Lisa fled Singapore. They drove to Malaysia, then flew to Thailand, then to Brunei, then, fatally, to Germany, thinking that Germany's famously protracted extradition process would give them time. It did not give them enough. Back in London, Barings executives had finally opened the books and seen what was inside account 88,888. They called the Bank of England. Emergency meetings ran through the night of February 24th and into the 25th. Frantic calls were made to potential buyers. Could anyone save Barings? Would any institution step forward and absorb the losses? The answer, one by one, was no. On February 26, 1995, Barings Bank was declared insolvent. After 233 years, it was over. The following day, the Dutch financial group ING completed the purchase of what remained of Barings Bank. The price they paid was £1, one single pound, in exchange for assuming all of the bank's remaining liabilities. On March 2, 1995, Nick Leeson was arrested at Frankfurt Airport. He was 28 years old. It was 1 week after his birthday. His wife Lisa was at his side. She had not known. She had been living a completely normal life in Singapore while the catastrophe was unfolding beneath their feet. She later said, through tears, "I thought we had a good relationship, but from the moment we were married, he was leading a double life." They divorced in 1997. Part 7. Changi Prison and the Cancer. Nick Leeson fought extradition from Germany for 9 months. In November 1995, he was returned to Singapore. In December 1995, he pleaded guilty to 2 counts of deceiving bank auditors and cheating the Singapore Exchange. He was sentenced to 6.5 years in Changi Prison, one of the most notoriously harsh prison environments in Asia. He entered prison as the most infamous rogue trader in financial history, the man who had broken the Queen's Bank, the man who had erased 233 years of British history with a number in a secret account. And then in prison, he was diagnosed with colon cancer. He was in his 20s. He was in a foreign prison on the other side of the world. His wife had divorced him. His career was gone. His reputation was destroyed. And now, in the most confined and vulnerable circumstances imaginable, his body was turning against him too. He was given, at various points, a prognosis that did not look survivable. He survived. Nick Leeson was released from Changi Prison on July 3, 1999. He had served 4 years and 4 months of his 6.5-year sentence. Released early for good behavior and on account of his illness. He was 32 years old. He was broke, divorced, and a convicted fraudster who had just beaten cancer in a Singapore prison. He had nothing. Less than nothing, he had a name that had become synonymous with catastrophic failure. Part 8. The Impossible Second ACT. What happened next is not a redemption story in the Hollywood sense. There was no single triumphant moment, no dramatic courtroom reversal, no standing ovation. It was quieter than that, and in many ways more extraordinary. Nick Leeson moved to Ireland. He wrote his autobiography, Rogue Trader, which became a bestseller and was adapted into a film starring Ewan McGregor. He remarried, a woman named Leona Torme, an Irish beautician who saw something in him worth building a life with. They moved to Galway. They had a child together. He became a public speaker on risk management, hired by banks, corporations, and business schools around the world to explain, from the inside, exactly how the Barings collapse happened and how to prevent it happening again. The man who destroyed a 233-year-old bank now gets paid by banks to teach them how not to be destroyed. He served as the commercial manager of Galway United Football Club. He survived cancer a second time when it returned in 2005. He built a quiet, private, family-centered life in the west of Ireland, as far from Singapore trading floors as it is possible to get. Is he a villain? Is he a victim? Is he a cautionary tale or a story of genuine redemption? He is all of those things simultaneously. And the complexity of that answer is exactly why his story refuses to leave the public imagination 30 years later. Part 9. What Barings actually tachus? The Barings collapse is taught in every business school in the world. It is on every risk management curriculum. It is referenced in every serious discussion of financial regulation and institutional oversight. But the lessons are not primarily about Nick Leeson. They are about the institution that allowed him to exist. Barings Bank gave one man control over both trading and settlement. the financial equivalent of asking one person to both commit a crime and investigate it. That structural flaw was not created by Leeson. It was handed to him. Barings Bank's senior management in London did not understand derivatives trading. They were collecting spectacular profits from a young man in Singapore without possessing the technical knowledge to evaluate whether those profits were real. Ignorance and greed made the perfect conspiracy of silence. And Barings Bank asked no uncomfortable questions, because the answers to uncomfortable questions might have stopped the profits. When a system is generating money, the people benefiting from that money have a powerful incentive not to look too closely at how it is being generated. Nick Leeson was the hand that held the pen, but the system he operated inside wrote the note long before he did. The two words he left on his desk, "I'm sorry," were the most honest thing produced by Barings Bank in years. Closing, FORTUNA, FILES sign-off. On February 26, 1995, a 233-year-old British bank was sold for £1. The man responsible had started his career settling paper checks for £12,000 a year. He had risen to the top of a trading floor through charm, hunger, and the willingness of powerful men to stop asking questions when the answers were profitable. He hid his losses in an account named after the luckiest number in Chinese culture. And when the earthquake came, as earthquakes always come, in markets as in life, there was nothing left to hide behind. The paper trail of account 88,888 was always there. It just took a disaster in Kobe, Japan, to make anyone in London willing to finally read it. This has been Fortuna Files. If this story made you feel the weight of what a single decision inside a broken system can cost, subscribe right now. Turn on notifications, because the file we are opening next week involves a woman who built a $9 billion company on a single lie and almost got away with it. Every fortune leaves a paper trail. We will see you in the next file.